June 6, 1944. D-Day. The Normandy invasion was the largest amphibious landing in modern history, requiring over 2 years of planning and the deployment of more than 260,000 men, 7,000 boats, and 3,000 planes. Winston Churchill called it the most difficult and complicated operation ever to take place. Success depended on people, at the right moment, turning their best ideas into action. One of these individuals was Andrew Jackson Higgins, a small boat builder in New Orleans. His big ideas changed the course of history. During World War II, Higgins Industries built more than 20,000 ships for the Allied cause, including PT boats and landing craft for vehicles and personnel. Higgins' greatest achievement was the mass production of boats, done more efficiently than anyone else. The most important was the ramped personnel landing craft, known as the Higgins boat, which made large-scale beach attack possible. His efforts earned him the title of the New Noah, bestowed upon him by a disgruntled Adolf Hitler.
As the designer, builder of amphibious and landing craft equipment, it is proper that our company sponsor this training film. These pictures will show the sturdiness of the construction, so that the men that operate and the men that ride in them will have confidence that they have a strong hull under them that will surmount most obstacles. Bring the boats on in and damn the obstacles.
Born August 28, 1886 in Columbus, Nebraska, Andrew Jackson Higgins, named for the fiery president, was only 7 when his father, a prominent judge and journalist, died following an accident. The family moved to Omaha, where Higgins honed his entrepreneurial skills mowing lawns and managing a newspaper route, which made over $100 a month. A year later, at 13, he sold his business for $1,700. Intrigued by a wrecked boat that he reconstructed, he designed and built a fast ice boat in his basement and sailed it on nearby Carter Lake. After completing school in 1903, he joined the National Guard and trained in amphibious maneuvers on the Platte River. In summers, he transported and branded logs in Wyoming, gaining a love for wood and the lumber industry. When Higgins was 20, he left for Alabama to work in logging because of his interest in boats and forestry. In 1910, he moved with his wife and children to New Orleans and started a lumber and export company. By 1929, plagued by an economic downturn and timber shortages, he moved into small boat design. He founded Higgins Industries in 1930, manufacturing pleasure craft and dependable, sturdy workboats. In the swamps of Louisiana, fur-bearing animals and oil deposits were accessible only by boat. To reach them, an exceptionally rugged, shallow-bottomed craft was required. To fill this need, Higgins developed the Wonder Boat. Higgins' reputation spread, and his shallow draft boats were in great demand for industrial uses. During Prohibition in the early 1930s, Higgins approached the Coast Guard, offering the Wonder Boat for patrols to catch rum runners in the Gulf of Mexico. Once the Coast Guard had Wonder Boats, Higgins approached the smugglers and offered them speedier craft. Higgins returned to the Coast Guard, telling them that they needed to replace their Wonder Boats with a newer and faster model called the Eureka, predecessor to his boats used in World War II. By the late 1930s, the U.S. Marines were concerned about a war with Japan and asked the Navy repeatedly to build a landing craft capable of assaulting islands. Failed beach assaults such as Gallipoli in World War I caused the Navy to shun the idea, sure that the bombardment of coasts would be best. The British had large ocean transports to carry tanks, trucks, and materiel, which were very necessary but unsuitable for landing platoons of fighting men. For that purpose, a small boat of shallow draft was necessary. It needed to be able to beach, extract itself quickly, and have a small turning circle so that it could head out to open water without broaching in a heavy surf. Higgins attempted to sell the Eureka to the Navy for 8 years without success. The Navy lacked funds and didn't welcome the competition or his pushy attitude. Finally, in 1937, the Marines convinced the Navy to purchase a Eureka to test, and it surpassed the performance of the Navy-designed boat. The Eureka had to be offloaded from the sides, leaving troops open to enemy fire in a combat situation. But even so, Higgins received a contract for 335 Eurekas in 1940. The Marines showed Higgins a photo of a Japanese assault craft with a ramp on the bow, and suggested that he add a ramp onto his Eureka. After the modifications, the new model, the LCVP, commonly called the Higgins boat, set the standard for small landing craft. Minor stability problems were quickly remedied, and the Marines considered the boat to be the most advanced landing craft that they had seen.
Not only could troops storm the beach, but they could land quicker, exposed for a shorter time to enemy fire. And with them, they could land their vehicles for a fast mechanized assault against the enemy's positions.
Naval forces also needed a craft that could carry tanks directly to the beach and unload them. In the late 1930s, the Navy had developed a landing craft for tanks, also known as a tank lighter, that had proved inadequate due to poor design. In May 1941, after pressure from the Marines, the Navy gave the challenge to Higgins. When asked to produce plans for a 45-foot lighter in a few days, Higgins told them that he would have a workable craft. When the Navy said it couldn't be done, Higgins replied, "The hell it can't, you just be here in 3 days." Within 61 hours, Higgins had built an operational tank lighter that worked better than the Navy's prototype. The Navy still wanted to produce its own design. It took the intervention of Senator Harry Truman and his Senate committee investigating national defense programs to resolve this conflict. Truman asked both Higgins and the Navy to build an example of their tank lighters for a head-to-head competition. On the test date, the Navy's boat nearly capsized in the moderately rough sea. In contrast, Higgins' LCM tank transport was unaffected, giving it a decisive victory against the Navy. Higgins' boats performed well for beach landings, except over coral reefs at low tide, like at Tarawa. Major successful landings included North Africa, Sicily, mainland Italy, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, New Guinea, and the Philippines, but the largest invasion was Normandy. After World War II, Higgins Industries was liquidated and Higgins Incorporated was formed with the goal of producing commercial boats. The Korean War brought the company back to the forefront of American shipbuilding, but the potential for greater growth ended with the death of Andrew Jackson Higgins on August 1st, 1952, at the age of 65. Higgins was innovative, with the personality of an old-fashioned industrialist. He had a difficult relationship with labor unions, but he hired women, black, elderly, and handicapped employees, and paid them equally according to their positions. He used creative methods, providing transportation, housing, recreation, and medical care to keep employees productive. Assembly lines operated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Record output won Higgins Industries the Army-Navy E Award. His success was a threat to Eastern shipyards, who did not want competition after the war. Unfortunately, they influenced the cancellation of a contract for 200 Liberty ships, the largest given to Higgins by the Maritime Commission. By the height of production, September 1943, Higgins Industries had designed 92% of the over 14,000 ships in the U.S. naval fleet. Their availability influenced how the war was conducted. Without Higgins' boats, landing on open beaches would have resulted in much higher casualty rates. Dwight D. Eisenhower credited Higgins with making the Normandy invasion possible. Without those boats, the whole strategy of war would have been different. At the end of the war, U.S. naval historians only briefly mentioned Higgins. To give credit for his accomplishments, the Navy would have to recognize its own failures. Captain Robert R. M. Emmett, the commander for landing forces in North Africa, said, "When the history of the war is finally written, far enough removed from its present turmoil and clamor to be cool and impartial, I predict that they will place Mr. Higgins very high on the list of those who deserve the commendation and gratitude of all citizens."